I'll clear the waiting room and then I'll just watch the waiting room for you.
Okay. Fine. Just gonna give it a couple minutes to see if we get anybody else. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. We may have a few more people kind of trickling in, but I want to start off by saying that we have an interpretation feature available for this meeting. And I'm gonna let Antonio, who's our interpreter, kind of share what I'm saying as well. But if you go down to the bottom of the screen, there should be a globe icon. And you can toggle back and forth between either English or Spanish, depending on which language you would like to hear.
Y bueno, vamos a comenzar esta junta. Primero que nada, quería pues pasarle el micrófono a Antonio para que les explique un poquito. Para la gente que desee escuchar esta presentación en español, en la parte de abajo de su pantalla, usted va a poder ver un globo terráqueo. Ahí a un lado del globo terráqueo, usted tiene la opción de elegir escuchar la presentación en español o mantenerse en el inglés, así es que así lo desea.
Thank you. And I'm just going to give everybody a couple minutes to toggle either to English or Spanish, just for 1 minute or so.
Les voy a dar como un minuto para que ustedes mismos puedan elegir ya sea quedarse en el canal de inglés o en el de español.
And if anybody has trouble with that feature, please type in the chat and we'll try and get it resolved.
Y si Y si alguien tiene dificultades para poderse meter en este canal, por favor pónganlo en el chat para poder ayudarles a resolver esto.
Okay, and Antonio, I think you can switch over as well. Thank you. Okay. And if anybody has audio or video issues as the meeting's going on, please just drop it in the chat and we will try and get it resolved. I'm going to start with a few housekeeping items before we get into the meeting. And the first one, I just want to let everybody know that this meeting will be recorded. So just a heads up. It will also be available on the webpage after the meeting is over for anybody who missed it and needs to go and take a look. So it is being recorded. And then another note, if you have any questions as the presentation is going on, please put them in the chat. At the end of the meeting, we will have a Q&A portion, and I'll go through any questions that were in the chat, and I'll also open it up for questions and comments at that time. And then we will also try and keep this meeting to 1 hour to respect everyone's time. Okay. So I will start off with some introductions. For those of you I haven't met yet, I'm Megan Daniel. I am a landscape designer and project manager with Austin Parks Foundation. We also have Katie Robillard from Austin Parks Foundation. She is the VP of Design and Implementation. And the two of us are the team that designs and implements park projects in the community through APF. And then also from APF, we have Alejandro. He is our community engagement manager. And a lot of you may have seen him out in the community. He's pretty involved throughout Austin. We also have community engagement specialist with PARD, Adrian O'Keefe, on the line. And then Rachel Morris, who is a landscape architect with PARD, who has also been involved with the design process throughout this project. So I'm going to start with just a quick overview of what we're going to be covering in this presentation. We'll start out with a section on APF, just who we are, and then what this service is that we've been offering for Grand Meadow Park. And then we'll talk about kind of what we've done so far and then the next steps as part of this service. Then we will go over the survey results from the last community meeting and survey. And then we will show the proposed concept plan that is a result of those survey results. And then we will also introduce the final survey and just give a quick overview of what to expect from that. And then at the end, we'll close with just a Q&A and then a quick reminder of how to stay informed on this subject.
Megan,
Yes.
would you explain how to go to the Spanish room one more time?
Yes. For those of you who need Spanish interpretation, there's a little globe icon at the bottom of the screen. If you click that, you should have the option to go into a Spanish channel or an English channel.
Para aquellos de ustedes que deseen escuchar esta presentación en español, en la parte de abajo de su pantalla usted podrá observar un globo terráqueo. Si usted presiona esa opción, le dará la opción también así de poder escoger ya sea la presentación en español o quedarse en inglés.
Is anyone having trouble accessing it? Unless I get a signal. Okay, so who is Austin Parks Foundation? We are a nonprofit parks organization that partners with community members like all of you to enhance everyone's lives by making our public spaces better. And we do this in a variety of different ways through volunteerism, activation, programming, advocacy, and financial support. So you may have seen us around town at It's My Park Day or Movies in the Park. And then we also invest and work with the city on parks throughout Austin. So one thing we started offering a few years ago is park design services. We found that there's a need in parks of all sizes to have kind of help with design and visioning, because that's usually the first step of any development within a park. And we work very closely with PARD, so we're partners in pretty much everything that we do. So this service that we've been offering to Grand Meadow Park is part of those design services, and I will cover what each of those are really quickly. So the first tier of design services that APF offers is called Park Design Assistance. And that is kind of a process just to help navigate next steps within a park. If someone has an idea, but they don't quite know what to do next, they can apply for Park Design Assistance, and we'll come out on site and kind of help guide the process. Try and go slow for the interpretation. Detailed park design is the next kind of tier that we offer. And so if a park has something that's been approved by PARD, but they need help with further design refinement or cost estimating, we help them get ready to seek funding for that project. And then finally, we have the overall park planning process, which is kind of our most intensive design service that we offer. And that is what Grand Meadow Park has been going through since March. So we offer this service once a year through an application process, and neighborhood, school, and pocket parks are welcome to apply. We don't typically take district or metro parks. That's usually a more intensive process, but parks like Grand Meadow and other neighborhood parks are really good candidates for that. And then I see we have a hand raised from Mike. If you wouldn't mind putting your question in the chat, I'm going to save them all until the end, but I promise I'll get to you. And it is kind of a unique service, so and a little bit difficult to explain, but I'll go a little bit more into depth on this service in particular. So the overall park planning process guides adopted park groups through visioning and creating an adopted park concept plan. So Grand Meadow, for example, has largely been undeveloped, and there hasn't been a concept plan or any kind of vision plan in place. But the community has, a desire to develop the park. And so in order to make that happen, we first have to start with that concept plan. So the Grand Meadow Neighborhood Park is the 2022 to 2023 recipient. And we really started this process kind of in March of this year with our first community meeting. And we leave a year for the whole process to take place, because it is, 3 rounds of community engagement that we go through before we get to the concept plan. This one we're hoping to do a little bit quicker, but we hope to kind of finish by the end of the year. So about 9 months, this one will end up taking. And then as part of that process, we also form a park design committee, which has mostly been members from Friends of Grand Meadow Park. And we'll introduce them in a second, but they have just been along for the whole process with us, making sure that we're getting good community outreach and kind of being our boots on the ground in the community working on this project with us. So the primary outcome of all of this is that we'll have an adopted park concept plan by the city of Austin at the end. And then from there, the park can seek funding. And since it is such a long process and there's a lot of community engagement and design involved, the estimated value of this process is approximately $100,000. So I'll go briefly over the roles of everybody that's been involved, because it can get a little bit confusing. But Parks and Recreation Department of the City of Austin is the landowner. So anything that's built on the land will be on lands that they own. And they've been along for this whole process to ensure that we're complying with all of their standards, and they'll ultimately have the final decision on the concept plan. And they will also be responsible for the maintenance of the park. So anything that gets built, we want to make sure that they can maintain. We are Austin Parks Foundation, and we've been leading the community engagement and design, and we have been the main point of contact throughout this process. The Park Design Committee is made of friends of Grand Meadow. They applied and were awarded this park design service. They've been doing stewardship on this park for a long time, and they have been helping us with the outreach within the community. And then the community is all of you who have been involved with this process, have been at the meetings and the surveys. We really appreciate and value time that anybody in the community puts into this project. And we hope that the final result will be something that the community really loves. So just a quick shout out of Friends of Grand Meadow. I'm going to say a big thank you to them for applying for the service, and then for all of the work that they do out at the park. They're very passionate about the community and the park in general. And they're very knowledgeable about food, forest, and community garden, which has been a big component of this project. Okay, quick project timeline. We've had community meeting number 1 and number 2, and this will be the final community meeting. And we will also open up the final survey on the website after this meeting. After we get the comments back from that final survey, we will update the plan and submit to City of Austin for official review and adoption, probably at the end of October. And then going into 2024, we hope to have an approved concept plan for the park. So now we'll get in a little bit more into the fun part, into the design. So layout plan. So the last community meeting, number 2, which was in person, we presented 2 different layout plans, and we intentionally made them very different so that we could kind of tease out what people liked from each concept. So this is a previous plan, number 1. And the idea with this plan is that it would be a little bit more natural, a little bit more formal. You can see one of the main features was the half-mile loop trail around the park. And then most of the activity is kind of centered over on the southwestern corner of the park. And then the other option we had was for layout plan number 2. In this concept, we tried to have features, a really wide range of features for everyone to enjoy. So you can see there's sports courts, a dog park, playground, parking lot. It really had a lot of features for everyone in the community. So after we presented these 2 concepts, we had a survey. We gathered first demographic information from everyone, and we found that the results were largely similar to the first survey. So about 90% of those who took the survey owned a house or duplex in the neighborhood. 80% live within a half-mile of the park. 72% are between the ages of 25 and 44. So we didn't have, most of the engagement was in that age range, not really younger or older demographics. And then 55% of people have children in their household. And those ages were really split pretty evenly. So that's just an overview of the demographics, and all of these survey results are available on the City of Austin webpage. Then we asked more specifically about different features, what people were asked to check yes or no if they would like to see them in the park. And everything we asked got over 50% yeses. The most popular features were the loop trail, meadows, community garden, playfield, pavilion, and then playground, art, picnic, a lot of things people wanted to see in the park. Kind of the lowest, the 3 least popular of everything we asked were basketball courts, pickleball courts, and beehives. And we'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute. we did ask specifically about the dog park, and we got really split results. You can see in the green chart that's shown above, this is the results with everybody included that took the survey. And it's slightly more popular to have a dog park when we took the totality of the survey information. When we excluded any results from people that lived more than half a mile away, it was a little bit less popular, but still very, very close. And this is pretty normal for dog parks. In neighborhood parks, it's usually kind of a 50-50 split of people that want it versus people who don't. And we'll also touch on this again later. The parking lot that we proposed was less popular. And given this and then the added project cost and impact of impervious cover, we had decided not to include a parking lot in the final concept. We do think there's ample street parking available around the park. And since it's a neighborhood park, we hope people will walk and bike and take the bus. And we'll definitely be providing bike racks and infrastructure that hopefully people can use those means of transportation to get to the park. Lighting was very popular, and safety in general has been one of the top priorities throughout this whole process. So lighting will be included in whatever the final concept plan ends up being. We will, as we get farther into the design process in the future, if funding becomes available and we go through those next steps, then we will look a little bit more closely about specifically where lighting makes sense versus where it doesn't. Okay, and then kind of a summary of what we learned from this survey was that layout plan number 2 that had more features in the park was a little bit more popular than the more natural concept. It was about a 60-40 split. But we heard from a lot of people that what they liked about the second layout plan was that it felt like community hub and that there was activities for everyone in the neighborhood to enjoy. For layout plan number 1, we heard that people really wanted to keep the natural feel, and they really liked the loop trail and wildflower preservation. So ideally, we would combine everything that's shown here into one concept, and that is what we tried to do. And so this is the proposed concept plan, the layout plan. And I know this is a lot to look at on screen and to digest, so I'm going to break it down a little bit more in the following slides. So one thing that might look familiar is this loop trail that we're proposing. The dashed kind of brown squiggly line that goes around is a half-mile loop trail, and it would be decomposed granite or something more natural. It wouldn't be a paved surface like concrete, but it would be kind of an even half mile so people could get on and walk, walk a mile or 2 miles. And then along that trail, there would be pockets of picnic areas that are shown in these blue bubbles. And then the pink would be community art. So the idea is that as you're walking around, you would see different pockets of things and have different options for what you could stop and enjoy. For the play areas, we are showing them all kind of grouped together in that bottom half of the plan. The brown would be the playground area. We heard in the last survey that people were really split between liking traditional play equipment and nature play. So we would do a combination of both of those things, which we've had a lot of success in other parks. The green would be an informal play field. So children at the playground could run onto the field and back onto the playground, and that could kind of act as one big play space. The pavilion shown in white would just give parents and children a place to kind of rest in the shade and kind of look out on all the activities. The purple little bubble would be exercise equipment that is meant to kind of feel like part of the playground, but would also have options for those who just wanted to exercise, maybe come off the loop and do a little exercise and then get back on. And then in blue, we're showing a sports court. And we haven't specified what sport yet. That will also be part of the survey. We can say that pickleball is not an option for this park. There is the rule of thumb at PARD right now is that pickleball courts need to be 500 feet or more away from adjacent homes. And this is mostly because of the sound of the pickleball is very specific for those of you, some of you may know. But we do want to say that pickleball is, that PARD is going to focus on putting pickleball courts in metro and district parks because they're a little bit larger and can accommodate more courts and the sound isn't so much of an issue. So the sports court will not be a pickleball court, but we have given several different options in the survey of what that could be. And so it's still kind of an open question right now. Then as far as the community garden, we are showing that on the western side of the plan. There would be a maintenance access from Panadero Road, so you could drive into the community garden. And that whole little dashed area, that wedge, we would just kind of designate for community garden and food forest. So that as the food forest community garden grow, they have some more space to kind of play with. And then you may see the little bee icon up in the north. We just want to say a little note about the beehives. These people might be questioning, what is that? Why would that be shown in a park? But this, we're showing a location on the plan for where it would make the most sense to house these beehives. And that is based on City of Austin guidelines and safety standards. And then if the beehives did become a reality in the future, that is something that would be managed by the community garden and food forest group. So right now we're just designating a location for it on the plan that we think would make the most sense. And then as far as open space, we just want to make a note about the wildflower preservation. This was a very popular among respondents. Pretty much everybody wanted wildflowers to be preserved within this park. So I just want to break down kind of what is shown to be wildflowers and what isn't. And this is kind of an optical illusion, but the informal play field shown in light green is actually only 8% of the site. And then the darker green is all of the wildflower meadow that would be preserved. And everything else that's kind of grayed out, for the most part, would not be impervious cover, aside from the sports court and maybe some of the picnic areas. So we really want to keep this a natural space and still allow for plenty of recreation within. So in addition to that, we think trees are very important out at this park since it is so open and flat. The darker green is the existing trees on site, which we will be largely just completely leaving as they are. And then the light green is kind of rough, how we would roughly propose planting new trees. And we've clustered those around the streets, around the loop trail, and then some of the key amenities. And shade has been a top priority in pretty much every survey as well. And then in addition to trees, we would also have 2 pavilions for shade. One of them would be more associated with the playground and the other with the community garden. And then the dog park. So as we said before, this was pretty split among respondents, almost exactly 50-50. What I've shown here is the proposed location of the dog park, which is based a lot off of this 300-foot offset, which is the minimum distance the dog park needs to be from any homes around it. So it kind of needs to be in the central location, but it would be buffered from the play area and a little bit separated from the community garden. And then just another note about the dog park. There isn't another fenced-in dog park in this neighborhood. I think even up to like more than a mile radius, there isn't a public fenced-in dog park that we have found. And there is a good chance if there is no fenced in dog park that people will use the park as an off-leash dog park with no fencing. So we do think this could potentially improve the safety of the park, especially with the playground being added and some other features that may have children and people coming to the park more often. And for further safety, we would split up the dog park into a small dog section and a large dog section. So we will still survey about this feature, and we want to get even more feedback and see if we can kind of come to a consensus on the dog park, or as close as possible. Okay, so that's kind of a lot to digest. We will have the concept plan and description in the survey, so you'll be able to view it there. And we ask that as many people as possible go take the survey. This will directly impact what happens with the concept plan. And the more input we get, the better. So there will be a question about the dog park, a question about the sports court, and then we will be asking people to rate their top priorities for Grand Meadow Park. And just to give a little more context about that, this concept plan, as we're showing it now with everything included, would be just under $2 million to implement everything. And implementation is not currently funded, but APF, PARD, and our partner organizations will be actively looking for funding once the concept plan is approved. So giving us this input on your priorities will really help us if we do get funding. Maybe there's certain portions that we prioritize building first, and a lot of times these park projects can happen in phases. We also want to note that what we're showing now is just a concept plan. Anything that actually gets built will need to go through further design refinement, and there's often a lot of permitting involved. So this is kind of one step of a longer process that would include more design and funding. So I think that is the end of that part of the presentation. I want to go through anything that's been in the chat, and then I will also open it up for comment. But for anyone in the Spanish section of this presentation, I'm going to give y'all a minute to come back into the English, and we'll be answering the questions in English and Spanish all together. I'll just give them 1 minute.
Megan,
Yeah.
that's actually not how it works for the Spanish interpretation. He'll just continue to keep translating you, since it's not an official breakout room. It's just a different chat.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
you can just move forward with questions that are in the chat, and then to any questions people have here.
Okay, great. And if we get any questions in Spanish, we'll address them that way. Okay, first question. I'm new to the neighborhood and only found out about the park yesterday. As you explain what your organization does, I got the impression you were working for someone. Does that mean that residents of the neighborhood applied or asked you to help?
That's mine. Someone already answered it in the chat, but thank you.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you, Mike. Yeah, welcome to the neighborhood too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so there's another question. The path, Megan said the path was a half mile. I gathered from the presentation online that it was a third of a mile. Yes, that it would be a half mile. I have measured for sure. We showed it as a third of a mile on the last one, just to keep it conservative, but it would be a full half mile. So, and then another question, do the plans cost the same? How do we trade? What is the mechanism for choosing among trade-offs between amenities and cost? Yeah, that's a great question about choosing between amenities and cost. So the two layout plans we showed previously that were kind of combined into one, we did not do cost estimating for those two concepts. I think we probably have a good, a general idea that probably layout 2 would cost more, just given the number of amenities that it had within the park. And then as far as choosing among trade-offs between amenities and cost, that's something where we would, and Katie and Rachel, feel free to jump in, but our process moving forward is going to be to take the survey information from survey number 3, see what the top priorities were within that, and then if some of those top priorities are very popular and not as expensive, those would be more likely to get built sooner, whereas some of the more expensive, if they're kind of equal and something is way more expensive, we may or may not have the funding for that. So it is kind of, we have to take the information we get from the community and then see like what funding sources we're getting. And sometimes different features can be funded through different grants. So the community garden and food forest, for example, would be eligible for different kinds of grants than some of the park features. So if we happen to get a grant for that, we could build that portion. And so it is kind of a mix of different factors, if that answers your question. Hope it doesn't take too long to get the park going. Yeah, it takes a very long time. We hear you for sure. Yes, and I know this park has been undeveloped for quite a long time. So we hear you on that one. The permitting and construction, planning and everything takes a lot longer than probably anyone would expect, but we are trying to move through as quickly as possible while still making sure the neighborhood gets to give us feedback. Does the dog park have to be a certain distance from the water detention pond? That is a good question. Rachel, do you know that one?
Yes. So actually it does not have to be a certain distance outside of a detention feature. In code, it has to be 50 feet away from waterways or outside of the critical water quality zone, and 150 feet away from a critical environmental feature, none of which are around the dog park location. So it is well outside of any restrictions that we have in code to that detention pond.
Thank you. Okay, I see a note from Cecilia. Friends of Grand Meadow will also apply for City of Austin Urban Forestry and other grants for the food forest. Yes, so I think that's great. In the community garden, we've really shown what we think the best location is on the plan and taken size recommendations for that and tried to place it within the concept plan. But a lot of that work will ultimately come down to the community garden group to get that implemented. I see our bathrooms included in the plan. We have not included bathrooms in the plan. I think Rachel can speak to this one a little bit too, but one factor is the number of people that own a home within this park, since it's almost 90% of people. Hopefully people can live close enough so it's not as much of an issue as some other community gardens. And then also just the cost of that is a lot. So we have not included them for now.
And Parks and Rec generally does not add restrooms to neighborhood parks. Those features generally go in district and metro parks where we expect people to have driven to the park.
That's all the questions I see in the chat. Is there any other questions people have? And just a reminder, the next step for everyone is to please go onto the website and take the final community survey, which will be helping us a lot. And then the website is really helpful for any information about this project. There is recaps of pretty much everything we've done so far on the project. If you want to go back and look at old presentations or the design as it's progressed, that all lives on the website. And we will be posting any updates we have moving forward on the website as well. Let's see. Yes, good question. If the plan is final, what is being asked on the new survey? So the survey will have two kind of more pointed questions. One will be about the dog park. And that will just be trying to get a better understanding, since it was so split up to this point, if we are going to include that or not. I think that one's kind of the one feature that's a little bit up in the air at this point. And then the second question will be about the sports courts. We'll be asking people what kind of sports courts they would like to see in that location. The location will stay the same regardless of what it is. It'll just be which sport that will be for. And then the last question will be about priorities, just to rank what is most important to you. So we can decide, funding wise, what is most important. Is there a link directly to the survey? Yes, we do have a link to the survey. It should be on the Grand Meadow webpage, or if not, it will be going up very shortly after this meeting. Yep, it's there.
Sorry, yeah, the links to both of the
It's there.
surveys are live on the webpage. That's why I included it on there. Yeah.
Staging. Yep, so they're both up, and there's an English and Spanish version for those of you who like to take it. Anything else? Make sure we get everybody's questions.
Hi. Excited to
Oh,
see
yeah.
you.
Have a question from Cecilia.
Well, I was just thanking everybody for their time, and
Oh.
thanks to the staff and the Parks Department. Thank you, everybody. We're very excited about our park.
And big thank you to Friends of Grand Meadow. As always, they've made this process really pretty easy for us in terms of community engagement. And we've had really great turnout so far on our surveys and meetings and everything. So big thank you to them, and then to everybody who has taken time out of their schedule to join. That's, make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, it's just a comment about the dog park. Okay, and then also one last thing to note, in the survey, there is, at the very end, there's kind of an open-ended question. If you have any hopes or concerns for the park, if there's anything specific that you want to tell us or say about the plan, feel free to write it in there. We read all of those comments as well. So that's a good place to put in some more detailed questions or comments. Okay. That might be it. Thank you so much to everybody who joined. Yeah, please check the website for any updates as we go forward.